I'm Carlton Hargrove, and this is 282. Welcome, folks, to the 282, or should I say 282. This is a brand new show. It's coming to WTVI. It's a weekly show, and we're in beta right now. So, give us a little room to kind of screw up a little bit. The first few episodes will air exclusively on the web, and we need your feedback to kind of get better. So if you see something that you think is not that great, then please hit us up on Twitter. Our handle is 282TV. On with the show. We've got a great bunch of guests today. I want to go around and introduce everybody. Up first, we've got Larkin Eggleston. And, we actually didn't talk about how to describe you, but I will say you're kind of a nightlife aficionado.
That sounds
Is that a good way?
to me.
All right. Up next, we've got Rhiannon Fionn, and she's a writer for Creative Loafing, among many other publications. And last but definitely not least, we've got a living legend, Mark Washburn, columnist with the Charlotte Observer. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Sure.
Yes. So, we'll jump right into the conversation. First up, I'm going to direct this one to Rhiannon. How you doing? I'm going to call you Rhi.
Yeah,
Can
go
we
ahead.
do that? Because that's a little shorter. We want to start the conversation talking about Occupy Charlotte.
Okay.
Now, I got to be honest with you. I haven't really been keeping up with the every nuanced movement of the local iteration of the Occupy Wall Street movement. But I know you have. So can you give us...
trying to.
Well, give us just sort of a quick, succinct take about what's been going on in like the last month or so.
Wow, in the last month or so. The movement is 2 months old now.
Okay.
So December 8th will be the 2-month anniversary of when they started camping. So it's hard for me to think of a month ago. It's all happened so fast, but I think what we've seen in the past month is them getting a little bit more organized. It's important to remember that they are an autonomous group. They stand in solidarity with the hundreds of other Occupy groups, but they are their own group. And they've done things like secure a team of attorneys. They've started a bank account at a credit union. They've enacted an oath that's about how they'll behave on what they call their campus now.
Okay.
Things like that. But as far as dramatic stuff, there hasn't really been anything really dramatic. They still get along really well with the police. They did have a kind of a joint protest with the Rainforest Action Network, which landed 3 of them in jail briefly.
Okay.
That was the day that Rand flew some people in from San Francisco or something, and they climbed up some poles and hung a flag about Bank of America's funding of the coal industry. So that's about as dramatic as it's gotten here so far.
Well, I do want to jump in and kind of ask you, and I was having a conversation with somebody a few days ago about just the imprisonment of some of the Occupy Wall Street people all over the country. And my point was sort of, isn't that kind of the point, to get arrested? Because civil disobedience really doesn't work if you're not being disobedient. Other than that, what makes that different from just a camping trip?
Well, I think there's a difference between civil disobedience, which would be climbing the flagpoles at Bank of America, and nonviolent protest.
Okay.
The encampment is a nonviolent, like long-term sit-in. It is a symbol. It's meant to say, hey, we're not going anywhere, we're serious about this, and we're going to keep working on it.
Okay.
So there's a difference there. One is supposed to be just kind of a long-term statement. The other one is meant to, yes, get immediate media attention and get people outraged on one level or
Right.
another.
What do you think, Mark? What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's so fascinating that in Charlotte, the protesters get along with the cops. We don't go around and spray them in the face
Right.
and all that. I mean, only in Charlotte. And it in a way, I mean, I've met some of these people. They're very nice people, very well behaved. They protested in front of Duke Energy a few weeks ago. They have a fuzzy focus, I would say, on what it is they want to get across, but they certainly have tapped into the national mood, which is things aren't going too well, and why does my CEO get a $3.6 million bonus when I'm going to be laid off any minute? So
Right,
I'm not,
right.
And I think there's a lot of that happening in the country today. There's a lot of distrust. Interesting question to me is, how long does the city allow this to go on?
Right.
Gosh, you've got the Democratic National Convention coming, and I think at some level they're thinking, aren't we setting a precedent for letting people camp out on public property, as nice as everybody may be, and how is that going to end? There's also probably some health issues and things like that may come to the fore. I know in New York that was one of the points that Bloomberg made when he ordered their camp cleaned out. So it's interesting to see how long it'll go on and who's going to be involved in it, but so far, so good.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think the city ordinance that's being batted around in city council, we can expect movement on that in late January. Does that mean that the encampment ends then?
So
I don't know,
Are they
but
trying to
that's-
make a move to sort of decide whether they should get rid of them or not? Is that what
Well, what they've said is that this isn't specifically about Occupy Charlotte, even though clearly a couple of city councilmen were pushing it forward because of Occupy Charlotte.
Okay.
What the council decided to do was wait and allow the city staff to continue working on it, and they'll bring it up again in January. I talked to Warren Cooksey for quite some time. He's a city councilman who represents the Ballantyne area. We spoke for quite some time, and he expects that there to be movement in late January. I asked him if there was going to be a public hearing. He wasn't sure, but he did say there would be a public comment period, maybe before the council in late January. So what that means, I'm not yet sure. I've
Right.
talked to attorneys on the other side and attorneys from a lot of different areas who have asked to review the ordinance. Several of them said that it's vague to the point of being unconstitutional. Some said that they expect it to be immediately challenged in court. So something is going to happen soon. Does that mean that the encampment ends? I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
winter could do them in too. So it's
Right.
we're just watching to see what happens. Over the weekend, they began dismantling their kitchen. I think in part.
they had a kitchen?
Yeah, and it's gone through various stages of organization. There was a point where it was rather large and they were doing a lot of cooking, and then there was a point where it was more along the lines of it's time to warm up the ramen noodles type of thing. So,
Okay.
but they've decided to take the kitchen away for a bunch of different reasons. One is that they don't have running water, so they were
Oh.
having to haul water, and if you've ever hauled water, 5 gallons of water is really heavy. So they
Right.
were having to pull that in from several blocks away. So it was just becoming difficult. And then also there's a sanitation issue. In a sense, they're taking away that excuse, that one aspect of the sanitation excuse from the city. So we'll see what happens with that too. I mean, does that mean they're going to live on pizza for the next couple of months? I mean,
Right.
so.
Well, we will find out. Let's move on to another topic. Chiquita Banana. It was reported, and you actually wrote about this, Mark, last week, about Chiquita Banana coming to town. They're relocating, and in order for Charlotte to get them to town, we gave them apparently $23 million in incentives. And the question then becomes, is it really worth it? Do we ever kind of recoup all those incentives, which includes tax breaks and relocation, da-da-da-da-da? What do you think? I mean, is it worth it?
You know, it's worth it probably at the moment, but the big danger is, okay, so we give Chiquita $23 million. Well, now Bank of America is looking at this. Bank of America isn't looking at this, but
Right.
if I were at Bank of America, I would be, and I would be going, you know, we really need to move back to New York or up at Boston, and what kind of a deal could we get? And, you know, we'd leave our counting house here, but we'll take all our executives up there if we can get $400 million to do it. And on one hand, you're sort of like, are we going to keep playing this game all the way down the line? I mean, if you were Akron, you're not going to get a great headquarters. Charlotte and some of the other cities, Jacksonville, Florida, I mean, they're nice cities. They're well located. They have things going for them, places you might want to move your company to. But at some point, you know, you're just bidding against each other. And I was thinking, gosh, you know, if the Westover neighborhood came to me and said, Mark, we're going to give you $26,000 to move into our neighborhood, I would consider that very carefully.
Right.
And then, you know, if South Park wants to come along with $29,000 and Cornelius wants to get in on the bidding, I will consider anybody that wants me at that point.
But how do you calculate even these numbers? I want to throw this out to Larkin. You know, you got 400 jobs coming. They said about $100,000 a pop. These kind of high-paying jobs, apparently. But where does the other money come in? Is it like housing or people drinking? I mean, where does the money? How does it play out?
Yeah, I mean, you hope that stimulates the economy to some degree by having those people. Now, granted, it's not going to be 400 jobs that are going to be Charlotte people getting those jobs. A lot of them will be moving here, but and it might have been you that wrote it, but I read somewhere that it's kind of like paying ransom. It was that you that wrote that? It sets a precedent that okay, well, they're willing to do this, and much like, I think a good example is Bruton Smith, when he decided he's got the money to say, I'm going to move my racetrack.
Okay.
Well, you don't want to call his bluff on that, and so then you start renaming streets and giving him tax breaks and doing whatever. And so I think it, on some level, and obviously that was Concord, not Charlotte, but it does set a precedent that, they can be held hostage, and this is the cost of doing business now, and we're going to make them pay it too.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think people would have been mad had we not gotten Chiquita. So I think it's one of those things. It's almost a necessary evil to some degree. Giving cash relocation
How much of it
is difficult, I think, but it sounded like that was a deal breaker for them. So.
How much of it is political? Like, is this something that city leaders and people like that can just kind of tout as being something? Hey, we brought all these jobs to town.
Well, have the city leaders voted on this? I mean, I understand that the state has voted on it, but has the city council voted on it yet? I mean, is this a final done deal?
Anybody who's in office when it happened is going to probably take some credit for it.
Right.
And I think that, certainly for the governor, she wanted to make it look very much like this is something I had a big hand in, and I think she did to a degree. But yeah, absolutely, I think it's a political play that look at what we're doing, and we're bringing jobs from Ohio to North Carolina. We're building the workforce in North Carolina. I think it has to be.
So has anybody actually done calculations on past companies that have come to town? Because now we do have a few companies that have kind of done that, and we can kind of look back and see how many jobs they actually create, how much money maybe was brought into the economy. Is there any way to quantify this?
Well, economists will tell you, a move like this brings in certain people. Certainly one thing that's true in Charlotte, and you talk about the political end of it, there's a perception that the town is on the skids. Mm-hmm. We've lost the headquarters for Wachovia. We've lost manufacturing to South Carolina and abroad. There's plenty of things that used to be here that aren't here anymore, and one thing that's not here anymore are a lot of those high-paying jobs, the executives and so forth. Now, they say it's a $107,000 average. Well, the chairman of Chiquita, I think, makes $5 million a year, so you don't really need a whole lot of high-paying jobs after that to come to your average. In fact, you could throw me in there, and I think we're at average. Okay. So that's one thing, but having a Fortune 1,000 company move to your city is good. It certainly gives you something else to say. Look, we're a corporate headquarters for this and for that. And Charlotte is a major city in terms of all that stuff. It's also in the middle of nowhere, and people get it confused with Charleston, West Virginia, Charleston, South Carolina, Clemson. No one knows where it is except they've come through the airport before and seen it from above. But it is a good thing in that way. It's a nice shot in the arm for the city, and people worked hard to get it, and they deserve credit. There's going to be a lot of debate about whether it pays off in the end. As the people in Ohio go, the former mayor up there goes, well, that's fine. I'm sure Charlotte cut itself a good deal, but in 10 years, who's going to cut the next deal for Chiquita?
True.
At least to get some people in the NASCAR Hall of Fame building.
Yeah.
That's the best thing, yes.
We need that. One last point about that. You actually were saying that Chiquita, you mentioned that Chiquita may not really be doing that well financially. So is it ultimately something where they're exiting because they can't afford to stay at all?
No, I think the banana business, like anything else, is cyclical, and Chiquita's the background on their current problems is a little more complicated than that, and involves international markets and sales and things like that. They've raised the price of the bananas, so obviously sales are down, but money's coming in. They're also going to face a lot of costs. They're going to move people in here from the West Coast and consolidate a bunch of offices. They're also going to open a banana research facility. I don't know
banana research
how you
facility?
Research a banana, but they're going to do that.
It's kind of scary.
And Dole also has a research facility up in Kannapolis, so it'd be a nice dovetail with that. So, these are not bad jobs at all. This is not a bad move for the city, and it's obviously not a bad move for Chiquita, but like I say, if South Park wants to make me an offer, I'm listening.
Okay. We've got a correspondent, Jarvis Holliday. He's doing a segment called Do You Care?
I attended 3 events last week that represent a cross-section of the varied world we live in. All 3 occasions drew large audiences filled with influential people from around Charlotte. As I looked around at the crowds of movers and shakers, I thought to myself, do these people really care? The first event I went to was the Charlotte Chamber's annual meeting that took place at NASCAR Hall of Fame. The event might be labeled as a meeting, but it's a big deal and drew about 2,000 people. The business community comes together to hear chamber leaders recap the year in Charlotte business. The star of the program that night was Chiquita, which earlier in the day had announced it would be relocating its corporate headquarters from Cincinnati to Charlotte. The announcement that 400 jobs, many of them high paid, would be coming here next year put the already joyous occasion into an even more festive mood. After the formal program, the reception began, which is why most people shell out $75 a ticket to attend. With all the handshaking, hugging, and backslapping, you wouldn't think Mecklenburg County's unemployment rate remains at 10%. One thing, however, that didn't seem to have been celebrated to the degree it ought to have been was World AIDS Day, which is observed every year on December 1st. I attended a great event that night, the Red Pump Red Tide Fair at the Harvey B. Gant Center. It's an annual event now in its third year that's part of the National HIV/AIDS Awareness Initiative known as the Red Pump Project. Women were asked to wear red high heels and men red ties as a great-looking crowd turned out to the event that featured a sexy, stylish, safe fashion show. At a point in the program, one of the speakers stated that there's one new case of HIV a day in Mecklenburg County. There was an audible gasp from the audience in response to this local statistic about the disease that the general public doesn't seem to have the same concern for as it did 20 years ago when Magic Johnson announced he had HIV. It's as if people feel that AIDS doesn't affect them personally, or it isn't a big deal anymore. World AIDS Day doesn't get the level of recognition that just one day of Breast Cancer Awareness Month receives. Could it be that it's viewed that if you contract HIV, that it's your fault, whereas people are diagnosed with cancer seemingly of no fault of their own? Earlier that evening, I saw Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and best-selling author Isabel Wilkerson speak at McGlowan Theater. She talked about her book, The Warmth of Other Suns, which she spent 15 years researching and writing. It's considered the first major work to chronicle the decades-long migration of 6 million African Americans who fled the South to seek a better life in the North, Midwest, and West. She gave examples of how many of the people who are icons in American culture today are products of their parents having made that migration in the early to mid-1900s. We would have never had creative geniuses like Berry Gordy, Miles Davis, August Wilson, Toni Morrison, or even native Charlottean Romare Bearden had their parents not escaped the South and started lives elsewhere that allowed them to pursue their talents more freely. As Isabel remarked, this country has come a long way, but still has a long way to go with racial relations. We were reminded of this the following day when the U.S. Department of Education and Department of Justice jointly issued guidelines on how elementary and secondary schools, as well as colleges, can pursue policies to achieve diversity or avoid racial isolation. Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, for example, have largely resegregated, as have many school districts around the country. In a press release, Education Secretary Arnie Duncan expressed the reasoning behind the new guidelines, saying, and I quote, "Racial isolation remains far too common in Americans' classrooms today, and it is increasing. This denies our children the experiences they need to succeed in a global economy where employers, co-workers, and customers will be increasingly diverse. It also breeds educational inequity, which is inconsistent with America's core values." But do we really care?
All right, that was Jarvis. Thank you, Jarvis. I still do not care. Now, last topic, NBA lockout basketball. As we all know, because of the NBA lockout and all the rigmarole with that, basketball has been gone for a few months. The big question is, of course, has anyone noticed? Have people pockets noticed? Especially when you look at Uptown, have local bars and restaurants, have they suffered as a result, and have visitors suffered? I mean, is there less stuff to do? Larkin, this is a really good area for you because, you know, you're out doing things, enjoying the city, drinking and having fun.
Responsibly.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it has affected, as far as people noticing, I think that it would have been a lot more in the public eye if we'd have gotten out of football season.
Okay.
There's such an obsession right now with the Panthers, even despite not having a great record, but with Cam Newton and all that. The sports fans of the city have something to embrace, and I don't think they've really missed the NBA as much as they would have come into football season. And really what we missed, I think, was about a quarter of the games, preseason games, which were very poorly attended. And unfortunately, the Bobcats are one of the teams where they don't necessarily draw large amounts of fans out to their games, the opponent does. So when you have the Heat in, when you have the Celtics, when you have the Lakers, we've probably missed 2 or 3 marquee games that really would have been well attended, possibly sellouts. A lot of the others, you know, a Tuesday night game against the Washington Wizards probably wasn't going to be that much of an impact to the uptown bar restaurant scene. Some of the people I've talked to in that scene and that work in that business have said that a lot of times the concerts and the other events at the arena will do a lot more for their business than the basketball games. But, you know, certainly money's been lost. But I think that for the average NBA fan in Charlotte, I know myself, I probably go to half a dozen games a year. That won't change just because we've lost a quarter of those. So hopefully maybe condensing the season will actually increase the per game attendance and maybe recoup some of those losses. But yeah, I think there's certainly been some lost revenue for some of those businesses, but it's, you know, I don't think it's a huge hit on them.
What about to the bottle service industry? I mean, you know, you got a lot of NBA players out there who are not going to butter, you know, renting out a $1,700. I don't know how much they cost.
Yeah, I mean, you say there's a lot of NBA players. I mean, there's 15. So that's not really a lot when you look at the fact that half of them are, well, we're pretty young now, but at times half of them are married family men that live in South Charlotte or whatever. I mean, that's probably a blip on the radar. It's, you know, maybe one guy once a week or something. So, I mean, you miss having players like that because most of the NBA players particularly don't seem to live in the city when they're not working. Mm-hmm. But, you know, we've got young guys a lot on they don't really want to encourage them to be out all that much. There's a handful you'll see around town, but I just don't think that in and of itself is much of a hit to anybody.
Speaking about the lockout, though, you know, one of the most vilified people coming out of the whole, you know, deliberation was Michael Jordan, who Jason Whitlock called out really hard, who's a sports columnist, basically saying that he's been sort of undermining young black players so that they will never attain the wealth that he has. I don't know. Have you been following this at all, Mark?
Well, Michael Jordan is not a basketball player anymore. He's a team owner, and he's coming at it with a little bit different perspective, perhaps, in the past. And I really don't understand the economics of professional sports, but I can tell you that somebody who's making $6 million a year to play basketball is ridiculous. Now, I tend to agree with the players in the NFL. They go, we deserve these exorbitant salaries because every time we go out there, every Sunday, it's like being in a car wreck. It is very punishing, and we're going to be drooling by the time we're 40. Basketball is a contact sport, and if you ever get down into the expensive seats, and I rarely do, you can see it. It is a contact sport, but not on the same way that football is.
Right.
You know, it's much closer to baseball and, you know, being a baseball catcher, I think, as far as all that goes. The other thing is, here's the problem. Jordan's right. The NBA's economic model is broken, at least as far as teams like Charlotte go, small market teams. I mean, we are not, there's like the Knicks, you know, and there's 4 other teams that are going to make money no matter what. But the rest of the league is just going to be not making it. So unless they get that figured out, unless they get the balance in there, and it's going to be about 50-50 now, and that may work for everybody. But I just can't really make the case that professional basketball, is that big of a deal, really, in all our hearts and minds. I haven't heard anybody going, oh, I can't wait for this to be over. And now everybody's like...
I see the NBC or CBS or CNN breaking news things about their standoff about money, and the only thing I think of is they sound like a bunch of brats. And I can't believe that's breaking news.
But isn't this still a labor issue when you really get down to it? I mean, yeah, most players aren't really making the millions of dollars. I mean, they're making, you know, $400,000 or whatever.
But it's still hard for people to sympathize with someone who's making $300,000, and that's what they're all making.
But even if you can't sympathize, that's still not make it a labor issue, though.
It is. But I mean, I think
is playing a game laboring?
Are
we being for real?
They
are we putting that in the same category?
They put a lot of time into their
to make a
profession.
lot of people a lot of money.
Right. There's a lot of practicing. There's a lot of meeting. I mean, it's not. They don't just go out there and pick up basketball.
But it's still a game.
It is.
And our society could live without.
But it also generates a lot of money, and they deserve a portion of that money. But at the same time, like you said, the way the system's set up, it's not the NFL, and it's teams like the Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The NFL would never win in the NBA in small markets, and it is a broken system, and they didn't fix it. with,
And I
with the way
kind of
the
disagree
agreement
with you that it's a game. You know what it is? It's show business. It's a
Yeah,
performance,
okay.
and these people are performers, very gifted performers, and there aren't many people in the world who can do what they do, no question.
Except for me.
Except for you. But
Aaron
But
Hargrove.
still, I mean, if we're going to call it a performance, do we have to have it? We don't have to have it in our society.
We don't have to have most stuff in our
Right,
society,
exactly.
We don't have
So,
to
I
have
mean-
282.
But we choose
need
to.
it.
I mean,
Right.
if no one went to the games, then it would cease to exist. People do go to the games. And
Right.
just because they don't as much in Charlotte doesn't mean they don't in other markets. You go to a Lakers game and it's red carpet event. But Charlotte also notorious, I think. I feel like the whole state of North Carolina at times is notorious. As soon as the Bobcats, if they're able to become highly competitive, if they're a top 3 seed in the NBA playoffs and they make it to the NBA finals, there will be a lot of Charlotte Bobcat fans you've never met before.
Exactly.
The same with the Panthers. The Panthers have a losing season, and all of no one cares about the Panthers. As soon as they're in the Super Bowl, everybody's claiming they're the most diehard fan. They've never missed a game, and this and that and the other.
Right.
So there will be Bobcats fans if and when we're able to get to that level. But Charlotte,
If.
We shall see. We shall see. Well, thank you guys for joining us. I really appreciate you coming down today and taking time out from work and all the stuff you do. Thank you, folks, for watching 282. Come back next week. And like I said before, I'm sure you've seen many flubs and mistakes and things like that. Hit us on Twitter at 282TV and tell us what we've done right and what we've done wrong, okay? All right, I'm Carlton Hargrove, and have a good one. That's it.